The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
If you're an options trader in the crypto markets, chances are you're trading with our next guest. It's Deribit, the largest options trading, crypto options trading exchange in the world, based in Panama. And joining us now is Luuk Strijers. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Crypto Options and Futures Exchange, Deribit. Good morning, Luuk.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Of course, you're the right person to talk to today because this is quite a volatile day in the crypto markets. And if there's one thing that we know about options, it's all about volatility. So what are you seeing right now in the crypto markets, particularly in the options market, when it comes to how people are positioned in Bitcoin, in ETH, et cetera, at this really trying time?
Yeah, so we see a lot of activity, as you can imagine. So the market in our entire product range is highly active. Same across the entire space, of course. You already covered inflation, the USD Luna story. So all of that is causing uncertainty, causing the markets to decline and implied vol to spike. So we've seen implied vol trading at around 60. And it spiked to over 90 in let's say 2 days, which is incredible. As you mentioned, option prices are impacted by implied vol, so the premiums are getting more expensive. So what we see is a lot of people either benefiting from this, but also using our market, using the various strategies in place to protect their portfolios. So options can be used to benefit from potential upside. That's, let's say, the easiest approach. But we have a lot of institutional flows, so around 80% of our market is not retail, but it's actually very large firms trading and especially hedging their spot portfolios. So when underlying markets are crashing, Bitcoin at 29 and a bit, you see a lot of put hedging. So we see more. The biggest volume instruments are the puts these 2 days, while typically those are the calls. So normally we are skewed towards bullish behavior, and now it's the opposite.
So where is the market kind of like pinning its point? You know, you have this so-called max pain point that you guys follow, but also where in general do you pin, for instance, Bitcoin right now? How is the market positioning with it? As you mentioned, the put-call ratio has gone up tremendously, but nonetheless, generally it's been called. So if we were to step back and look at the market, kind of which way is it going?
It depends on which expiry you look at. So longer dated, it gets a bit more bullish. But for example, max pain for May expiry, looking at that now, is 37,000. So it's quite away from where we're trading now. Typically, you see bigger open interest at the large numbers. So, for example, we see a lot of put open interest in the 30,000 strike. So we're looking at a few thousand on that particular strike. 20,000, of course. 44 is more bullish, so we see 44 and 50 are bigger. It really depends on the expiry, but are those, the bigger numbers are traded more heavily.
Now, those high numbers there that you were just citing, the 44s, et cetera, were those initiated as calls that were being sold in spreads, or is this just...
Yes, so partially to fund the trade, as in you sell the higher strikes to fund your exposure to the lower ones, but also most of them were open before, let's say, this week's carnage. So open interest is more sticky, so people don't tend to close that quickly.
Of the altcoins, is there anything that's grabbing your attention, or do you see opportunity?
We actually launched them in April. So we used to trade BTC and ETH only, as in a very wide instrument range covering BTC and ETH. And what we did over April and early May is expand that, which is rather unique for us. For the altcoins specifically, we expanded with a little bit less than 20 Altcoin Perpetuals, margins that settled in USDC, so stablecoin, a linear instrument, covering all the names, including Luna, for example. And as an inverse product, like we trade BTC and ETH, we launched Solana. So we have the full Solana suite now because of investor demand. So the linear instruments are only perpetual, which means more short-term trading, directional exposure for seconds, minutes, hours, or days. But if you look at Solana, we have them up until quarter at this moment, so you can trade them up until June. But we will most likely expand them until the next quarter, so September, so you can get the entire suite. So you can get futures, options, etc., based on Solana as an inverse instrument. So the feedback is very positive. People have been asking for this for quite a while. Why don't we expand? But the problem for us is that in expanding, you need coverage at all times. So we have a lot of instruments linked to Solana, puts, calls, strikes. And one single name results in let's say, hundreds of instruments, and all of them need to be quoted at all times, because that's like our policy. We want to safeguard market quality, not only today when you buy it, but if you decide 2 weeks from now to sell your position, we need liquidity as well, which means liquidity over the weekend, which means proper quoting on a Sunday evening, etc., which results in less market maker coverage. So it's not that easy to have a very wide underlying choice when it comes to options, because the impact for market makers is significant. So that's why we're always hesitant in building and expanding.
Mm-hmm. Luuk, I know you're a derivatives exchange, but wondering if you could comment on Coinbase. They had earnings yesterday and revenues came in lower than expected for the first quarter. Do you see this as a trend among crypto exchanges in general?
Yes and no. I don't think a lot of them are loss-making, as Coinbase numbers reported. Of course, we and other markets see a decline in new client onboarding volume. So if the market is bullish, we tend to see most signups, but also trading volumes are simply down. So yes, I think the trend of a negative performance versus the previous quarter is definitely there, but I don't think it would result typically in loss-making P&Ls. But I think their model is slightly different. They have a lot of staff, but also marketing expenses, which differs from exchange to exchange.
Luuk, where do you think the bottom is? How bad is this going to get? And what if you had to guess? I think that's what everyone wants to know for Bitcoin and just some of the alts.
The alts are, of course, difficult. If you see that Luna is reaching zero in a very rapid pace, I think people wouldn't have expected that to move that quickly. For Bitcoin, I think a lot of people hoped 30,000 would be the bottom. We see more and more interest in, for example, people asking us to launch the 50,000 strikes, because some of them are expecting the market to continue the crash. I think cryptos are heavily oversold when you compare it to equities. It's risk off, essentially the same as let's say tech stocks, but I think it has been moving very rapidly, and you can wonder why CPI numbers have that much of an impact on crypto. But where the bottom is, I never dare to answer those, because it's difficult to predict. But I don't think we are at the bottom. So it can, looking at the markets and the way news impacts volatility and trading behavior, it can go down beyond current levels.
All right, not at the bottom.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask about your bill in Panama, the one that you've been lobbying for. But before we do, you mentioned that you have perpetual futures in Luna. Did you notice any unusual activity in the lead up to what just happened?
No, so we just launched Altcoin Perpetual. So we are far from, let's say, a driver in this space. Even though I would like to state otherwise, we are following. We are one of many markets. We want to offer our investors choice. That's why we offer this, and our markets are in line with others. But we're not the let's say the price drivers, the initiators of different behavior. But we have less activity there. So I wouldn't say there's anything to see on our markets at this moment. Our options market is totally different. We are leading there. We have 90% market share. We have billions in open interest. We can definitely see stuff happening there. But in the altcoin perpetuals is simply too nascent yet.
Okay. Yeah, I was, and of course, you know, just real quick, you were talking about, we were talking about Panama. I mentioned you were based in Panama, and you guys are lobbying for something there, correct?
Yeah, so there's a new bill in Panama. It has not been approved yet. So some media claim it's already approved and it's in the works. It's not. The president still has to approve. So there's multiple layers of approval, and the last one is the president. And this is more like a framework. So the actual regulation, which is the key details for anyone in the space, they will have to be defined 3 months after the president signs. So the president has until the end of May approximately to sign, or veto it, or amend it, so he can also suggest changes. And once it's approved, the Ministry of Commerce has to come up with the actual regulation. So a platform like us, what are the requirements KYC-wise, AML-wise, all of that stuff, trading-wise, what is impact and what's not? And that's still to be seen. So yes, we are in talks, like many others, because it covers the entire crypto space, and like issuance of tokens, DeFi, everything. It's meant to be a little bit vague, but all-encompassing. So purposely a little bit vague to make sure that all crypto activity is covered. So it's a promising setup, but the devil's in the details, of course, and that remains to be seen. Panama is very strict when it comes to, let's say, opening bank accounts. You have to have bank reference letters. You have to scan all copies of your passport, which is kind of unique globally, and also results in tech issues. So the typical KYC tools available don't verify all passport pages. They only look at the front page. So there's a lot of this kind of nitty-gritty, but these details are important to us. So they could impact us technically or reg-wise.